Hello and welcome. In this video, our goal is to introduce and integrate Factory Boy into our Django tests. Let me illustrate the problem. Initially, in typical Django tests, we are creating instances of the model and manually writing the values, such as in here. This is a test to assert the response of a film detail endpoint. As you can see, when I run this test passes. But there is a better way to instantiate the datasets. By the end of the video, this is what we will have accomplished. We will be replacing these lines with a film equals film factory line. This uses Factory Boy and factories, and that way, the creation of the data will be cleaner and easier since we don't have to instantiate the field values of the models. So, to get started, open an existing Django project. I will be using a simple Django REST API application to illustrate the integration of Factory Boy with Django. A link to the project will be uploaded together with the video for reference. Make sure you are on the Django Testing 1 branch, as that will serve as the basis of this video. Let me just walk you through the contents of this project. I will show you the Swagger documentation. As you can see, there are several endpoints for each app. So there is a film app and a producer app. The film is connected to the producer through a foreign key. So these are the endpoints. And if I try this, you can see that the result is there is a film and a producer. So back to the application, we also have tests here, which is for the endpoints. Our goal is to integrate Factory Boy to make these tests more dynamic. So let me clear this. To get started, make sure your Python interpreter is set for your project. I will put a link on the description and on the top right of this video on how you can do that. Now let us install Factory Boy. Since I am using Poetry as the dependency management tool, I will type Poetry add Factory Boy. If you are using virtual env, type pip install Factory Boy. Once Factory Boy is done installing, we can proceed to creating factories. So wait a second, what are factories and how does Factory Boy help in making tests easier to create? Factory Boy helps by replacing the instantiation of datasets with factories, which are basically a wrapper around Django models that allow us to create datasets easily with default values. So let's use this project illustration as an example. Under the tests folder of the film app, create a file and name it Film Factory. This will store the film factory that we will be creating. So let's start by creating a film factory. Type class film factory, and this will inherit the Django model factory from Factory Boy. We'll import that. And for the film meta class, let's set the model into film. Now, for the default values of the fields, let's type title equals Harry Potter and year published equals 1992. These are the default values that will be set if you didn't explicitly write the field values in the instantiation of the factory. If you have read the Factory Boy docs, you can see that Factory Boy provides custom factory subclasses for various ORM, including Django. That is why we can use this Django model factory as the base class for our film factory class. Now, let's try this factory in our tests. Go to your test views file and go to the test get film detail function. Let's replace this line of code with our film factory. So type film equals film factory. Let's give it an explicit value, so title and year published. Let's copy that. And let's import. Oh, by the way, you can also use .create, but it also works the same without the .create. I'll just open the Swagger endpoint so we can see what we are testing. So here to the API docs, let's just see what you want in our actual and expected result. So when I try this, and I'll give it an ID of 1, This is what we expect our result to be in the test, with a producer JSON object inside the film JSON object. So let's close this. So there are two ways to run the tests. If you are using PyCharm like me, you can configure the test runner, so you can just click on this green button and click run. I will put a link of a video that I created on how you can do that in the top right of this video and in the video description. If you are using other code editors, you can just type pytest dot in the terminal and it will run. Now let's run this test. And we can see that the test failed. So let's look at why. It's because we don't have a film.producer ID. So our film factory doesn't include the producer yet. So what do we have to do? So how do we handle the producer? The answer is to use subfactories, which handles objects that have complex fields. The strategy is to create a producer factory and then use a subfactory helper in the film factory to associate the two factories. So let's first create the producer factory. Under producer, let's create a directory called tests and create a file called producer factory. Let's quickly create the class. So producer factory Django model factory. Let's import that, and in our meta class, so class meta, the model will be set to producer. And for our fields, let's give it a name of Ben and an email of ben@example.com. And let's add the producer. So type producer equals factory dot, let's import that first, subfactory. So subfactory takes in a factory so that you can associate the two factories. So type producer factory and let's import that. Now that we have done that, let's go back to our test views and let's add a producer to this film. So to explicitly add a producer, we can just type producer equals producer factory. Let's import that and give it a name of Ben and an email of ben@gmail.com. Now that the producer is created, let's link it to the film factory by adding producer equals producer. Now let's test this. When I run this test, it should pass. And yes, it passes. By the way, there is an easier way so that we don't have to explicitly write these values here. Let's remove this producer line and remove all this, since we already have default values for our film factory here and in our producer factory here. So back to the test views, let's just use this film. So replace this with film.id and the email of the producer will be film.producer.email. By the way, let's give it a type hint so you can see the other fields. So film and then film.producer.id and then the name will be film.producer.name. Back to our title, let's change it to film.title and the year published to film.year published. Let's delete this code. And when you run this test, it should also pass. Cool. Now that it passes, let's change the other fields in the tests. So here, let's just replace these two with the film factory. So film factory. Film, yeah. And now we can also change the assertion to film.producer.id, film.title and film.year published. Let's test these two, and it should also pass. For the create, we can just test this by removing this line and adding a producer factory. And when we test this, it should also pass. We can also test the whole class. Cool. You can also use the command line if you prefer, and it should also pass. So, using the factories looks cleaner than using fixtures, right? That's it. You have learned how to integrate Factory Boy into this test. We have also learned how to test complex objects easily. Now, the next step is what if you want to change these static values into more random values. That is what we will tackle in the next video by using helper functions provided by Factory Boy such as faker, lazy attributes, and sequences. I hope you learned something from this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.